Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
What if you could double your energy naturally without caffeine or stimulants in just 3 short months? It's not only possible, you can transform every aspect of your health if you follow the 12-week blueprint we've created for you in the Awesome Health System. The Awesome Health System is a free course where you receive a daily video lesson spanning the most cutting-edge secrets for air, water, exercise, sunshine, optimizers, mindset, and education. It's something most companies would charge hundreds of dollars for, yet you get it for free when you go to bioptimizers.com. To access your course, register to download the PDF report called 3 Phases of Bioptimization, which gets you access to the report and daily access to the first lesson in the 12-week, 84-day Awesome Health course.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And if you are a female biohacker, you want to turn off all your distractions because today we are going to go deep with one of the foremost biohacking female doctors out there, Dr. Molly Maloof, who has written a book called The Spark Factor, and it's the secret to supercharging energy, becoming resilient, and feeling better than ever, which will be available January 31st, 2023. And of course, it is currently available for pre-order. We will have some links available for you to do that. Now, for the bio of Dr. Molly, she provides health optimization and personalized medicine to achieving or high-achieving entrepreneurs, investors, and technology executives. And you can guess it, yes, she lives in San Francisco. For the 3 years, she has taught a pioneering course on health span, and I want to get into this for sure, in the wellness department of the medical school at Stanford University before launching her own company inspired by her unique philosophy of health. Since 2012, she has worked as an advisor or consultant to more than 50 companies in digital health, consumer health, and biotechnology industries. Dr. Molly is on the frontier of personalized medicine, digital health technologies, biofeedback-assisted lifestyle interventions, psychedelic medicine, and science-backed wellness products and services. And of course, she's been able to jump in here today on the Awesome Health Podcast in her busy schedule. Molly, welcome to the show.
Oh my God, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor.
Well, you know, here we were a few weeks ago in an undisclosed location in Arizona desert, where we were engaged in some advanced health span technology, particularly in enhancing mitochondrial function. I think what's really interesting about your story is, first and foremost, you are a female biohacker. And I have a little bit of pet peeve about the quote unquote biohacking industry.
Yeah.
And that is almost all of the, public facing personalities are men and are directed towards men. And I'm no disrespect to that. That's great. But I think some of the unique components in female physiology and female needs are not being properly addressed. And a lot of women who are really working hard to deal with the unique challenges that happen for women when they're trying to add to their health span or performance are following dictates developed by men, which are not necessarily applicable. And you're the person who is, coming out of the gate here in 2023 and kind of creating a framework specifically for women and their unique needs. How did you get started in this whole thing, and how did this drive your health philosophy? Give me the background, the whole 9 yards, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of this.
I would say that the first time I ever got interested in what was not even termed biohacking, but like altering your body using, basically science, like being able to transform your physiology using scientific interventions. I was in 8th grade and I was reading Popular Science, and there was a whole article about modafinil being used in fighter pilots. And I was like, oh my God, these pilots don't have to sleep and they can just be awake. And this is the coolest thing I've ever heard. I would love to have this. And then, fast forward many, many years later, I definitely ended up trying modafinil, and I did not find it useful for me. It gave me some memory issues. It didn't really give me the kind of benefits that a lot of other biohackers got. And so that's the thing about biohacking, is that it's very personal, and you can do your best to go learn from other people, but you have to find out what works for you. And that's why data-driven biohacking is really kind of what my expertise is all about. So in my practice about 10 years ago, I left the mainstream system and I was like, okay, look, that system is built, it does its thing, but like, I'm really interested in this health system that we need to build, which is, how do we measure and amplify health? And it's not really the same thing as diagnosing and treating illness, but it's a similar path, because like, on one hand, you look for, you gather data to identify pathology so that you can use drugs and surgery to affect a person's physiology. But on the health paradigm, it's like you can gather data to identify areas of improvement and then do different interventions to actually get higher and higher levels of health. And it's a similar system, but it's different because we're using labs and we're not using diagnostic ranges. We're using functional ranges. We're using wearable technology that traditionally was used to only treat disease states, like continuous glucose monitoring. And we're putting these on healthy people. And like, this was kind of one of my claims to fame in the Silicon Valley in 2014. I was at this quantified self meetup. And I was like, I'm wearing a blood sugar monitor and I'm finding all sorts of things about myself that I did not know. I didn't know that I was borderline pre-diabetic. I didn't know that all the gluten-free foods I was eating were actually causing me blood sugar dysregulation. And I was supposed to be healthy, right? And this is very early in my career. And I realized, well, crap, if I wasn't perfectly healthy and I was young, and what about everyone else? And then you find out that 1 in 3 people have prediabetes, which is basically insulin resistance. Insulin resistance precedes heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and dementia. We're not testing for it early enough. Most doctors are looking at hemoglobin A1C, which is a terrible test. They're looking at fasting glucose, which is often inaccurate because people are already up and about during the day before they get the lab done. And we're just not really looking at a person's life. And that's where biofeedback and continuous monitoring really comes in. So when you put on a Hanu Health HRV monitor, when you put on a glucose monitor, you can get this movie of your life. You can see how your body's really adapting to stress. And, you and I did NAD therapy, and I was always so skeptical of this. But one of my friends who has a company, Dave Karunsky, called Heads Up Health, he's like, Molly, this stuff changed my blood sugar regulation. And he showed me, and I was like, oh my God, all right, that's data. I'm going to go try this. And what I got out of it was my heart rate variability went up 30 points and stayed up for like 2 months. And it's gone down a little bit because my stress has gone back up, but it definitely made a significant improvement in my stress resilience. So this is what biohacking is about. It's like gathering data, not just to diagnose disease, but to improve your body's physiology so that you don't get sick.
Great information. And I want to parallel that with an observational stuff for maybe some of our medical industry professionals who may be a bit skeptical, but we need to go back in time. If you look in the mid 1960s, when they introduced Social Security programs in both Canada and the United States, the life expectancy was 67 years old. So you would retire at 65. They anticipated you'd be on 2 years of government pension, and then the likelihood that you would go out. And all the models were built on that.
Yeah.
Now, one of my friends is Dr. Horst Filzer. He's the Harvard medical doctor that was involved in putting the first stent in the body. And he says over the course of the last 40 years, surgery, what used to take 6 months recovery from a heart surgery, you can go in and out and be out within 48 hours with very minimal interventions. And we are sitting at a point, if you go back to the New England Journal of Medicine, and Professor Olshansky said that the disability adjusted life expectancy in America is now at 60 years old, with a general life expectancy of 80. Now that's diminishing thanks to abuse of pharmaceutical drugs and these type of things. So scientific development has really added about 20% of our life expectancy in the last 50 years. Now, if we apply Pareto's principle of 80-20, biohacking can probably extend our healthy life expectancy into the mid 90s and maybe to 100 and beyond if you have predisposition, because ultimately you have genetic factors combined with your lifestyle that are going to contribute to what takes you out. Heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and of course, interesting enough, medical error is the 4th leading cause of death. Contraindications from whatever you're doing before.
Yeah, I don't think enough people really study that properly, and it's like it's definitely an issue for sure.
So let's face it, some of the best, brightest, smartest, and most resource people in the world are hanging out in Silicon Valley, and they're kind of on the bleeding edge of this technological innovation of about applying real legitimate science to individualization so that you're not part of a general rationalized trial that doesn't account for individual genetics or lifestyle components or all these things. The future is completely customized healthcare. What is it that you feel is so pertinent about this expanding field, and why have you chosen to become a leader in this as a voice?
So before this field really even emerged, it was like, I was in 2011, 2012, I was really unhappy in my residency. And I was just constantly seeing people come into the hospital for the same things. And it was like 80% of these things were preventable, right? And it's really disenchanting to work in a system when you know that almost everything you see is preventable. And like the most interesting, like doctors are supposed to have like the most interesting job in the world, where you're like, you get to see these weird cases, and it's like, Dr. House. Actually, what most of medicine is about is like very repetitive, very much the same stuff over and over and over again. And the fun, cool stuff is the rare stuff, right? And that should not be the case. Like, we know that these conditions are preventable. And so I think what was really frustrating for me was like, I was just like, I don't want to spend my entire life putting Band-Aids on people when there's like root causes that we need to be looking at. And there's actually a bunch of other women doctors like me, like Robin Berzin, like Stephanie Daniels, who similarly got their licenses, didn't do board certification, went into functional medicine, and or trained themselves on regenerative medicine and naturopathic medicine and Chinese medicine. I mean, I've studied all of the above, and you can learn so much about human health by not just sticking with allopathy. Mm-hmm. So I kind of decided I was going to move away from the mainstream system. I was going to build my own, and I had foresight. I was like, this whole healthcare system is going to change because tech is going to change it. Like, technology is going to completely alter medicine. So I was like, I might as well join that movement because I know it's going to change everything. And I know there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of doctors that are going to try to follow me if I don't go now. So I kind of like jumped ship, went into the tech space, and like literally had no idea where I was going to get a job. But I was like, I'm going to get a job. So I went to Burning Man, found some great networking, and got a job working for a company that was actually funded by Peter Thiel called MetaMed. And we were doing personalized medical research. So I was hanging out with all these like super crazy smart rationalists and developing like a systems for using data-driven research, like data-driven, like personalized health optimization. Like, we were just going systematically through our patients' histories, and we were going into the literature, and we were trying to find the best research, most up-to-date research for their problems. And so it was the first thing I started offering my practice, was like personalized medicine. And like, people would come to me that were like, they'd gone to all these doctors and they have not been able to figure out what was wrong with them. But it's like rare to hire a doctor just to sit in front of literature and just research for you. So that was what I was doing initially. And then I was like, well, I still want to I don't want to just do research. I want to practice medicine, but I want to do it my way, because I want to measure and amplify health. Because I was like, I want to know what health is about, because I know that healthcare is not the same as health. It's really sickness billing. And sickness billing is what medicine is about today. And I wanted to be about health optimization, because I met this doctor who was like, that was what he was doing. And I was like, wait, you can make people healthier for a living? What does that even mean? He's like, well, you optimize their fitness, you optimize their sleep, you optimize their stress, you optimize their circadian rhythms, you optimize their nutrition, their supplements, their mood, and their cognition. And I was like, what? And I was like, this has got to be my job. So I was like, you're going to mentor me. And this guy's like, okay. So he writes me a list of labs to learn how to order, and then buys me a textbook of functional medicine. And he's like, good luck. And so I have to like start teaching myself. And then I met another doctor, this guy, Richard Lee in Silicon Valley, who was creating a health optimization system. It was called GeneSolve. And he taught me how to do custom compounded hormones, personalized supplementation. And I got this like amazing crash course on this kind of medicine directly from these amazing doctors who are doing it differently. So fast forward. as this was all happening, as I was building my practice, I was also working with startups because I was like, how am I going to build a practice from scratch? I don't have any money and I'm in debt. And so like I started working for startups. So I started going to, events and meetups and meeting founders and being like, hey, I'm Dr. Molly. Here's what I do. Love to help you. And I started kind of making essentially, I was kind of like a chief medical officer for hire. People are looking for understanding how the healthcare systems work, and they wanted to be able to, work within it, but they also wanted to build technology. So they needed help with logistical frameworks of how to actually understand the body. They needed help with scientific research, with marketing, with product development. And so I got to have so much fun working with so many companies. And then by the end of working with 50 companies, you're like, okay, I got to start building my own companies at this point. Like, this is silly. Like you reach a point where you're like, yeah, okay. I get how to build a startup. I've worked with a lot of startups. And personally, I find that like in the innovation space is the most fun to work in. And what's interesting is that a lot of the things that I thought were, a lot of things that I was doing very manually and analog, like personalized probiotics and CGM and heart rate variability monitors, are now productized consumer platforms. And I had this vision a long time ago. I was like, half the stuff that I'm doing is going to be available to consumers. It's all going to be systematized. It's going to get cheaper. It's going to get faster. And boom, boom, boom. One thing after another, things just started turning into products and companies. And it just became this sort of wave of a movement. And now we're in this new world where there is mainstream medicine, but there's this whole world of digital health. And there's this whole world of consumer health optimization and personalized health optimization platforms. And they're all still in their infancy, but it's the beginning of something much greater that I think Apple and Amazon and Facebook even potentially are going to be a big part of.
So I want to interject here for our listeners and who are looking to kind of participate in health optimization. That's why they listen to this show or whatever.
Sure.
In your opinion and your experience, what do you think the key elements that a person needs to look at, and what kind of professional will they need to help them interpret that information if they're looking to maybe offset the genetic risks that they're inherited in combination with taking advantage of their genetic gifts?
Yeah.
And optimizing their health for maximum health span and maximum performance, I think, within that health span.
Yeah. So a long time ago, there was this thing called the Diabetes Prevention Program, and it still exists. It's very simple. It's like move your body. It's eat foods that are good for your metabolism. Eat whole foods for the most part. It's all about managing stress, right? So stress, movement, and food and sleep are pretty much the biggest drivers of health or disease. So I always tell people before you're detailing the car with all these supplements, because like I use supplements, get some data and figure out what you need to do to optimize. So like personally, I think that like the vast majority of people, if you can't afford to run a ton of labs right now, like the first thing you need to do is like figure out these first 4 pillars really. And you can get you can buy continuous glucose monitors from Levels Health, or you can ask your doctor for a prescription. You can even buy like an over-the-counter blood sugar monitor, like a finger stick tester, and just measure it before like 1 to 2 hours after meals, first thing in the morning. Hanu Health is a pretty affordable stress monitor. It's a polar heart strap and it connects to an app. It's very simple. But like gut health, I would say is still probably the number one thing that a lot of people don't know how to do without the help of an expert. Like it's nice. I don't think you have to have like stool studies, but I think it helps a lot to have a stool study. That being said, like for the most part, like almost everybody would benefit from digestive enzymes. And like, I never, ever thought 10 years ago, I would say that because I never understood them 10 years ago. I was always like, what's the deal with enzymes? Why do people use them? And then I spent all this time researching functional medicine and learning about gut health optimization. And like, if your gut is dysfunctional, then everything else is going to be done. Everything downstream is going to be screwed up because we're going to have more inflammation and you're just not going to feel well. And so, wearing an Oura ring is like, or even just like a Garmin Vivo Smart 4, they're like $100. Getting some insight into when you're sleeping, how much you're moving, and like the intensity of your exercise, like you can just have all these data streams coming into your body. But in terms of labs, I would say like vitamin D, like this is still controversial to me. I'm blown away that there are literally mainstream nutritionists who are like, there's not enough evidence for vitamin D, but I pretty much could put everybody on vitamin D because everybody's deficient. Homocysteine, really important marker of oxidative stress. B12 and folate alongside, because a lot of people are actually deficient in B12 and folate. And so their homocysteine will rise. Very simple fix, starting a B complex. Magnesium, like magnesium is important for 300, different, reactions of the body. So like magnesium is a simple hack for sleep. Taking a good solid dose of magnesium will definitely help improve your deep sleep at night. So vitamin D, B complex, magnesium. And then I like to look at a person's stool study before I start them on probiotics, because
what kind of stool studies do you like to use?
I like GIF. I've kind of always gone back to the GIFX by Genova Diagnostics, because they are constantly updating it and improving it. And they just seem to be on. This company's been around for a long time. Mm-hmm. And some doctors, like other companies and other labs, I just like this test. The 3-day is more accurate for parasites. I'm still not conclusive on whether or not, there's so many controversies around whether or not parasites are something we should all be freaked out about. I don't worry about them.
I read the book Parasite FX. It was terrifying. Or Parasite Rex. Parasite Rex. Have you ever read that book?
Oh, see, what labs are the best? It's apparently the GIFX is not the best for predicting parasites. And I'm just what is the best test for this?
Right.
Because if I can't test, then how do I know?
Right.
And so I'm just kind of I did get a parasite once in Hawaii, because I didn't wash my vegetables enough. And I knew I had a parasite, because I was there's something wrong. And I went and I prescribed some parasite medicine, and immediately it got better. The next day I felt
I almost lost an eye from a parasite. It was crazy. That was a really close one. Yeah, it was really wild. And I read this book, Parasite Rex, and it was the most terrifying health book I've ever read in my life.
Oh God. Well, did it have recommendations on what to do about it?
No, it just scared the crap out of you.
You cannot read stuff unless they have.
Oh, I know. It was horrible. I was I was reading this book and I'm like, oh my God. And then, luckily I survived. I do have some scarring on my eye and
what was it?
I forget the name
of it. Or something?
I forget the name of the parasite.
God, that's terrifying.
It was. And you go to some countries and you see people with that kind of glossed over eyes and stuff.
Oh,
and it's parasites. And I had one of those.
Oh my God. How'd you find out?
Well, my eye became excruciatingly painful.
Yeah.
And
I'm admitting this right now. I do not know. I'm not an expert in parasites. It's the one thing I still don't feel like I have nailed. But I do think that, I took antibiotics last year because I was traveling too much and I was wearing my immune system down, and I had to take an antibiotic. And I remember getting my stool study back, and it was dysbiosis. All the bad bacteria growing, none of the good bacteria. So I started loading up on Bioptimizers probiotics, and slowly but surely my guts improved. But it's I like data to drive decision making. There's doctors like this guy, Dr. Ruscio, and he's super against labs. But when you see directly on a lab that's you have non-detectable levels of lactobacillus, it gives you an encouragement that maybe you should take a probiotic. On the other hand, if somebody has SIBO, they got to be a little bit more careful with which probiotics they choose, because certain probiotics can worsen SIBO and certain ones can't. And so you got to be careful with which strains you use for different reasons. And so this is kind of why I like to do some stool testing, because I just want to figure out what's really going on with somebody.
Yeah, we've been our head researcher at the Birch International University, Dr. Monia Advik. She says that we're about 10 to 20 years away from the post-antibiotic era, and antibiotics have saved millions of lives through preventing the spread of infection. However, we're at the tipping point now, and going back to my friend Dr. Filzer said that, half of the people who die from surgery don't die from the surgery, they die from the infections from the surgery, especially if they're into multiple infections and they have a compromised system. So this is a real area, I think, where there's an explosion of research and development. We're a long ways from it. And of course, the microbiome is so dynamic. So consistency, I think, in testing, as well as correlative biofeedback, how do you feel? Is your gut bloated? Are you having problems in the number two situation or whatever?
How's your skin look?
Exactly. These elements are indicative, and I always believe in correlating biofeedback with lab research. And at the end of the day, health is also a subjective experience. It's like, I feel good or I feel bad. Now, that is millions of years of evolution that is built into the system for our own response system. So if we can correlate with data and research our natural functions, then we can create models that I think will be more successful in the future.
Yeah, I would say that my model is like very much based on the mitochondrial theory of aging. I have a friend, this guy Ben.
Can you break that down for people? Because this is the buzz. Everybody's talking about the mitochondrial and blah 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 blah. What is the mitochondria?
Sure.
How does it work? How does it get compromised, and why is it so important?
Okay, so I'm going to give you like the sort of like long history of this. So like there's this thing called the endosymbiotic hypothesis, right? And basically like in single celled organisms were able to evolve into multicellular organisms by engulfing bacteria and literally harnessing the bacteria's ability to harvest energy from the sun to give them the ability to have more energy production. So there's this idea that like the organisms that basically gather the most energy win. So you have this biological imperative, and your imperative is like find resources, feed yourself and your kin, make more of yourself. And this is the most base programming of existence, whether people like it or not. I don't care what you do with your life. Your body cares about this. Your mitochondria care about this. And when I made this realization, I was like, wow, we make life really complicated. And I don't think everybody has to reproduce. I'm definitely not one of those crazy people who is like, I don't want 10 kids. I come from a big family, but like, I don't think everybody has to have a bunch of children, but there is this programming that wants you to. And there's this programming that wants you to also find food and to assimilate that food so that you can reproduce yourself. And this is a pretty common pattern in pretty much life itself. So basically the mitochondria, we were taught in high school that these organelles are like the powerhouse of the cell, right? But then what I didn't realize until I met this guy who's not a doctor, but who literally transformed his health. He went from being an obese investment banker to like literally looking like an absolute like astonishing godlike man. Like he literally looks like pure muscle, and he can do the splits, and he can do yoga, and he can do big wave surfing. He's a marvel of a human. And he runs a biotech company, and he's like working on mitochondrial research for pancreatic cancer. Anyway, long story short, this guy became my mentor, and he was like, Molly, like I met him at yoga class, and he's like, you got to know, if you want to care about health, you got to know about mitochondria. So this is like many years ago, maybe 4 years ago or so. Maybe it was probably 2018, 2017, around then when I started really digging into this. And he was like, okay, so mitochondria are not just the powerhouse. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, they're sensing and integrating all these messages from your environment and determining where the energy goes and actually helping you direct energy to survival or reproduction. So this is why when people struggle with fertility, they're often very stressed out. They're often very anxious. The body, when it's under threat, will actually shift its metabolism and go into a state of protection, right? And this has also been popularized as a concept called the cell danger response by Robert Naviaux. And then Martin Picard is this other researcher who did a bunch of, he's done a bunch of research on how mitochondria integrate the stress response, right? So they actually not only produce energy, and like you take substrate into the mitochondria, which is like byproducts of metabolism, you turn it into energy, but you also are using the mitochondria to produce cortisol and to facilitate the enzymatic reaction of producing adrenaline and noradrenaline, right? So like these stress hormones are literally being like we're actually metabolizing stress with mitochondria. And then on top of that, they play a role in sex hormone production. So this is part of the reason why when you see somebody who's under a lot of stress, can actually change their hormonal milieu. You see, I've seen this in hedge fund managers I've worked with, where they have a really bad year and their testosterone is really low and their cortisol is really high and they're in a state of chronic threat. And like part of what you have to do is like show them that these biomarkers are reflective of their integration of the world around them. And so we have to actually work on mindset and also work on shifting exercise patterns in order to get the body out of that threat state. Easier said than done. Way, way easier said than done. I mean, I'm personally experiencing high cortisol right now because of, frankly, launching a book and running a company and a practice is literally batshit. But, but like the thing about health that I want people to understand is that it's kind of like ATP is currency, right? So I'm really good at making ATP. Like I'm great at building energy and health into my body, but I'm also really good at spending it. And this is the thing that I'm learning about balance is like, and actually Katrine Valinsky, a friend of ours, I called her up because I had just done NAD therapy and I was feeling like 20 again. And she was like, and then I went to 2 different weekends of a conference, of a festival, and then promptly got a cold. And I was like, I don't know what I'm thinking. I'm like not taking enough time off and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And she's like, Molly, you've got to start training like an Olympic athlete. Like you actually need to start thinking about yourself. Like you have to start recovering more. You can't just go spend all the energy you make. And I was like, you're right. And so even I need somebody to tell me things at times. But the thing that people need to understand is that when you hit midlife, if you have not engaged in health promoting practices consistently, your energy deficiency can hit somewhere around 50%, right? And this is the theory of mitochondrial theory of aging, is that when we start going below 50% energy capacity, we start to break down. And so this is the concept of like, if you don't have enough energy to maintain the integrity of the structure, the house will not thrive, right? So like if you have a house and you cut power 50%, you have a brownout, the fridge will start to melt, the microwave won't work, stuff isn't just going to get done. If you have contractors coming in, but they can't plug in their tools to make the upgrades, and nothing's going to get upgraded. So this is kind of the concept behind aging is like, basically energy, like metabolic disease is really behind the vast majority of what people are dying from, right? Like kidney failure is often due to diabetes. Diabetes is a metabolic disease. Heart disease is largely related to blood sugar dysregulation and insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is in itself a signal that there is metabolic dysfunction. And oftentimes when people have cancer, there's insulin resistance. So if you look at the body through the lens of metabolic health, you realize that you have to conserve your energy and you have to optimize your energy production. And you have to like build in recovery into your system so you don't waste all your energy, because life is stressful and stress is basically what drains the energy capacity. And this is what I've been going through this year is like great year, so much success, but so much stress. You have to kind of look at your body like a giant battery, and your mitochondria are like batteries and capacitors. And these are big words for like, they store charge and then they deploy charge, and they can store charge for later use and they can immediately deploy charge. But if you drain all of your energy, then you're not going to be able to maintain things like your immune system and your digestion and your detoxification. And so this is why when people burn out and their cortisol goes low, they actually start having problems in these spaces. They have issues with digestion and detoxification and brain function, because when energy starts diminishing, the most energy demanding organs fail first. So I really think a lot of mental illness is actually metabolic in nature. And a lot of people don't want to accept that because they're like, no, there's these 2 paradigms of mental health and physical health. And I'm like, just give us 5 to 10 years and this is all be out the door. I really think that you can't separate the mind from the body. And if you have energy dysfunction and dysregulation, you're going to have problems with brain function and with anxiety. And one of my friends, Ellen Vora, has this great book on the anatomy of anxiety. And she's basically been able to link directly to a lot of panic and anxiety, and her clientele is related to blood sugar dysregulation. So we're starting to learn that like this concept, like, look, I'm willing to admit it may not be correct, but I do think that there's a really solid grounding, and it fits within the hypothesis that inflammation is also a big part of aging, and inflammaging is a thing because mitochondria are actually a big part of immune system regulation. And so I believe a lot of out of control inflammation is actually rooted in the body's metabolic dysfunction and stress response.
The Bioptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level. The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like masszymes, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others, is a total game changer. Suddenly, you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with Masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's masszymes.com and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
So I'm going to share with our listeners. So recently I was preparing for World Championships in bodybuilding, and at the age of 50.
Huge.
And I can correlate to what I felt like in 2003. So literally almost 20 years ago, before I understood many of the things that I'm illustrating today, is I was literally in a state of brain fog, physiological pain, and extraordinary sleep dysfunction. And it was just really painful getting ready for the Mr. Universe contest in 2003.
Yeah.
Now this year, I've been applying biohacking technology, and for the last few years, but this year I was able to compete at the World Championships and maintain a diet, restrictive diet for 18 months, which is way longer than I did before. Last time was 11 months and I was dead at 6 and continuing going forward. At 50, by leveraging this biohacking technology in mitochondrial optimization, I felt great. In fact, I was training with more volume at 50 than I was in 30, and I felt better doing it. And some of the key elements that we're doing: NAD treatment, cryotherapy.
How often are you doing NAD?
About every 3-4 months. I'll do a 5-day 750 milligram to 1,000 milligram dosage intravenously, which was absolute game changer. And I do feel that the atmospheric cell trainer, where you're going into you're varying from, I think it's a equivalent of 22,500 feet down to like 2,000 or 3,000 feet, and going back and forth, which are forcing your mitochondria to adapt, is a great one. Cryotherapy. And then I also use a HOCAT machine, which is flooding my system with ozone through you sit in a capsule and you get steam thing, and then you're pumping ozone to the system. And I do believe that reduces the toxic load on the system over time.
Yeah.
So those are the elements that I felt really contributed to my capacity. And what was really remarkable is I started running this year.
Wow.
I didn't run for 35 years. And now I can easily run an hour at a 6 to 6.5 mile an hour pace.
Wow.
And I don't feel tired. I'm not outside of my heart rate zone. And that was after about I think it was my second or third treatment of NAD. That's what I started to experience. So like, I just wanted to run again like I was a kid. And I was like, this is remarkable.
Yeah.
So I'm saying that not because I'm an expert in those things. What I'm saying is this stuff is real and it works. And I have definitive proof at a very high level. What's that?
You have real data, both qualitative and quantitative.
Yeah. And so I'm continuing to move down this model and see where it all ends up. And so my second half of life, I'm actually more excited about than my first half. These were goals and objectives I started out when I was 15. And now that I'm 50, we're starting to, the science is catching up and we're continuing on it. It's a lot of fun. So I want to take this back to specifics. We talked about mitochondrial function important, blood sugar monitoring, and your ensuring that you have a healthy microbiome. And of course, you're going to need a medical doctor to help you interpret this. Like you need someone from the space.
It's really good to get a good functional doctor, or even a great naturopath. Like there's some really good naturopaths out there. And like, there are even pretty decent chiropractors, but you really got to get referrals from people and know, like the best way to find a good doctor is find somebody who's really healthy and be like, who do you work with?
That's my standard. I will not take advice from someone who's not healthy. The second thing is, I always love the people who suffered and then found a way out of it, because they're usually the most motivated.
Well, I've got my own version of that. I mean, I definitely got diagnosed with ADD in my 20s. I was mostly sedentary in my 20s. I was in a very, I was not happy with my life. I had some trauma in college, so I felt very dissociated regularly. So I've had to fix quite a lot of different problems. I had terrible gut health. I actually had chronic, first it was constipation and then diarrhea for many years, gluten. And I didn't know I didn't know that I had celiac. So I had all sorts of problems when I was younger, and I grew up a sickly child. I was not a healthy kid. I was constantly getting antibiotics. I had pneumonia as a child. I had tonsillitis chronically. I had sore throats. I ended up having my tonsils out. I had all sorts of problems with my teeth because I grew up in the Midwest. I had the wrong food. I ate way too much crap when I was a child. And so I felt like as a kid, I was like, man, someday I'm going to figure out my body. Someday all of this is going to make sense. And it was a long-term dedication to improving health, but also I burned out multiple times in this life. I feel more capable and strong now, than I did in my 20s. My 20s, I had brain fog all the time. I don't know how I got through medical school. I definitely had a lot of challenges, and it was living in the Bay Area certainly was a huge gift, because the Bay Area, there's a major culture of health and healing. Mm-hmm. It's just very normalized to get help with everything. And there's also just there's really great healers there. So I got
the entire West Coast of North America is really influenced by a lot of the Eastern philosophy. I think got embedded in here, and preventative techniques from the East got integrated, and the proliferation of a variety of practices that were based on that, I think, is a big influential pattern. Yeah.
But I do think that it's key to, realize that some people ask me Molly, you've always been this healthy. I'm no, I have not. In fact, now I do want people to understand that health is not this day where you wake up and you're I'm there, I'm optimally well. It's this constant interplay and dynamic exchange with your environment, right? Because you're literally respiring every moment.
And it's not just fitness or cosmetic health either, because oftentimes we see that. And Peter Attia's research, I think, is great, where he's talking about, and I apply this in all levels with muscle mass, body fat, and he does it mostly with cardiovascular, but you can get to that top 2.5 percentile. You're probably getting all the benefits without the liabilities. When you start going into the higher levels of performance, oftentimes the cost of that exceeds the benefit. So that's where I think the threshold of optimization of health is.
Well, there's sort of this bell curve, right? And it's most people are pretty much, actually, it's kind of curved more towards this end, or most people are in slightly less than good health and average health. And then there's actually fewer and fewer people on the healthy side. But there's always this question of performance versus health, right? Mm-hmm. And when I finally understood health through sort of this money kind of concept, I hate to admit it, but your currency of your cell is your ATP. And if you have energy, you can do anything. Mm-hmm. But like I was trying to say, health is basically the ability to adapt and self-manage in the face of adversity. Sometimes that adversity is self-imposed. Mm-hmm. This year, I have fundraised. I have taught at Stanford. I have traveled to multiple countries and continents. I have moved. I have built a company. I launched a course. I'm launching a book. I'm marketing a book, and I'm hiring people. It's a lot of things to do at once. And I'm on podcasts every day. So I'm not saying that my health has been perfect this year, but I've been able to basically adapt to the challenges of adversity. and recognize that there's going to be years where I'm going to be in better health than others. There's going to be years where I'm going to have to spend some of that saved up currency. Yeah. And so there is a bit of a diminish, like I've noticed that like I've had a great performance year, but my health has not been like, in comparison to the previous year, I'd say my health is better the previous year than this year. And so it's like, am I going to try to continue on this pattern? No, like next year, I'm totally like, I'm already laying the plans for more balance, but I look at health and performance, like it's like money you're spending. How much money can you spend on this performance? Right. When like elite athletes, they're all about recovery now, and I've had to learn this myself. Like I have to bake in recovery. I have a tendency to want to like last month was stupid. I worked every day and I didn't take any time off. And that has like real consequences, like Thanksgiving break, I was super exhausted and I'm already ready for another NAD round. But the key is recognizing that like, if you like, for example, when I got COVID, I didn't get long COVID, like I got a cold, but I recovered very quickly. Like it's how quickly does your body recover from an insult? How quickly does your body like be able to like maintain balance? That's a better predictor. And it's also a good barometer, like looking at your blood sugar monitoring, looking at your stress monitoring and realizing, okay, like if you're not if I continue in this path that I'm on today, I would probably end up like, it would really like, if you do this for years on end, you are going to wear yourself down. And I've worked with a lot of executives who are in their 50s and they have worn themselves into diabetes. Mm-hmm. And diabetes did not happen overnight. They didn't wake up one day and they were diabetic. They worked for 30 years at an unrelenting pace and they didn't recover at all. And they ate whatever they wanted. And so like, that is what I'm trying to help people avoid. And that's what you have to be thinking about. If you're a high performer, you're an athlete, it's like, this is always a question of like, what is this in service of, right? Like I'm willing to spend some of my health this year in order to get a book launched, but I'm not willing to continue doing this year after year after year if it ends up affecting my health long-term.
Well, it's like as an astute investor would talk about having a balanced portfolio and that you rebalance your portfolio either every 6 months or every year, because you're going to have some areas that are outperforming and some things low performing. And, health is one of the things that contribute to quality of life.
Yes.
But it's not an absolute, because we all know that regardless of how healthy you are going to end up dead. Life is a fatal condition. And it's unavoidable. So the question is, balancing the level and quality of energetic resources you can supply to live your determination of a full and complete life.
Yeah.
And I think, that's defined uniquely by each person.
Yeah.
And if you have more energetic capital on this ATP side of things, then you're more able to distribute to the various areas of life in the time frames that you like. If you have a family, if you have kids, especially for women, early in that first couple of years, it's very taxing on female physiology, which leads me to the next question, which we started with. What are the differences in biological optimization between men and women? And where are some of the errors that women are making, perhaps, when they're just defaulting to male authorities on the topic of biological optimization?
Well, I mean, having been in the startup space for a long time, and worked with a lot of different teams, the reality is that men do not have a monthly cycle. They don't have menstrual cycles, right? And so as much as it would be great if they did, they don't. And so I'd love for them to have some, it'd be great if actually a man knew what it's like to feel like a different person every week of the month. But women literally have these phases: the follicular phase, the ovulation, during the follicular phase, you haven't released an egg yet. Your body is have lots of energy. You can hit your personal best in the gym. You feel more confident. You can eat more carbs because you're burning them harder in the gym. And you basically are you're outward facing, you're just more energetic. And then you hit your ovulation. And it's every time I'm ovulating, I'm always wow, I look way more attractive. I should only do photo shoots when I'm ovulating, and then you hit your luteal phase And your luteal phase, you're just more inward oriented. You're not going to want to really push it incredibly hard in the gym. You don't want to not work out, but you're not going to necessarily need to hit your personal best. And you're going to be a little bit less insulin sensitive, but you tend to crave more carbs. So you have to be a little bit more careful with what you're eating. But you also, when you hit your menstruation, you start burning more calories. So like, it's natural to actually eat like another 200 calories a day when you're menstruating, and that's totally normal. And interestingly, I learned this from Stacey Sims. She's got a great book called Roar. It's great for athletes. When you're menstruating, basically like the very beginning of your menstrual cycle is typically when you're more exhausted and tired, but then near the end of your cycle, you actually get a wave of energy. And like, you often do really well in athleticism when you're lower, your hormones the lowest. And so it's kind of like an interesting hormonal cycle. You've got this estrogen that's a little bit more dominant during the first part of your cycle, makes you a little bit more insulin sensitive. Then you've got more progesterone during the second part of the cycle, which makes you retain water a bit more. So you feel a little bit more bloated, but you also technically need more salt around then, which is kind of paradoxical. So you're kind of changing your body throughout the month. And what I'm learning and what I've had to learn is that like, you can't just be the same woman every day. Like, you have to respect this cycle. And so I actually recently, like, I was supposed to record my book this weekend. I'm going to be on my period this weekend. And I was like, I cannot do another weekend through a period. Like, I can't, I have to take time off. So I actually moved my last 2 days of recording to the end of next week, because I've just had to learn that like, I'm not going to be sounding my best. I'm not going to be most energized. I'm going to be tired the first day of my 2 stages of my cycle. Interestingly also is that women's cycles are highly predictive of what's going on in their life. And if you are having issues where your period has stopped or your period is incredibly heavy, you need to actually take a look at your life, because it's a pretty darn good reflection of what's happening in either unexpressed emotions or dietary issues that need changing. Lack of exercise can actually affect, too much exercise can affect your cycle. You typically see women in two categories, where like, they're the women who are exercising and under eating, and they get relative energy deficiency of sport, where they've stopped their period. They're literally energy deficient. And then there's the energy excess, where people are insufficient exercise, eating too much body fat, insulin resistant, eating the wrong things. And they just end up having things like polycystic ovarian disorder and like too much, basically like too many eggs around, versus like, the body of a woman who's not ovulating is like not really fertile. So we don't really teach women this properly growing up. And I had to learn the hard way, where I was dating this guy and I was like trying to fast as much as he was. And I was like, I just can't right now. And he was like, no, women can do anything man can do. I'm like, yeah, if that were the case, why do I feel like I'm losing my mind when I'm trying to fast? And I'm not like, I actually do think that fasting and women are like totally compatible, but it's highly dependent on your stress levels. Mm-hmm. Women, if we feel a sense of scarcity and we feel a sense of fear and threat, we will just hoard calories, and like, we will turn down our thyroid. We will hold on to every single calorie and we will gain weight. And so I've seen men who like, they start doing fasting and then they're like, oh, I'm gonna do some keto too. And then they're shredded in a week. And you're just like, what? I was trying to do that, and it's not the same. And so one of the things that I try to teach women in the book is like, you have to be more careful with these biohacks. You have to do one at a time. You have to see how your body's responding. If you are layering too many of these and your stress cup is overflowing, you're going to have to, one of them's going to have to go. So like, under high stress, I would not recommend a lot of fasting. Under high stress, I would definitely recommend carb cycling if you like to eat low carb, like carbohydrates, and occasionally really eating like a nice heavy meal. Even if you're like trying to lose weight, sending that signal of abundance in your environment can actually help your brain not go into a state of scarcity. So women just have to be a little bit more careful, because we have work now, we have children. I don't have children, but I definitely have enough companies that just it's basically like having children. And so I kind of look at women as, we're in a really unique place in humanity where like, we're not just caregiving now, we're actually running companies, we're actually like leading teams. And so there's a lot of stress on us, and we have to respect the fact that we have different biological imperatives. Like, we are here to make life. Men are definitely here to protect life, right? Like, that's really these two big drivers. Now, obviously men help create life. We're the ones who incubate it. We're the ones who produce, like actually create the baby and push it out. But, women are more oxytocin dominant. We're definitely more likely to want to bond and connect during stress. And men are vasopressin dominant. Men are all about, protection, defense, and aggression. And it's like understanding that these are just different biological imperatives is like, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. I think women want to feel protected. We want to feel like there's men in our environment that care about us. Like I've got one of my neighbors lives down the street, and he's like, if anything ever happened to you, you can just call me up and I'll be right over. And it's like, that is a very healthy masculine response to wanting to protect, right? And women want to nurture, and we want to like basically connect. We want to be the ones in the society to connect and nurture. So, there's a lot of controversy these days around like men and women. We are the same. We can do the same thing. It's like, no, actually, at least when it comes to biohacking, like, when I was, I'm not saying we can't do the things that men can do. We just have to dose them differently. We have to keep in mind our stress response. We have to keep in mind our cortisol levels, and we have to keep in mind our body's, natural needs of following a rhythmic cycle with nature and with our body's natural response.
So let's talk about your book, The
Sure.
Spark Factor, The Secret to Supercharging Energy, Becoming Resilient, and Feeling Better Than Ever. That's an enticing title.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what that book's about, who's it for, and why you wrote it?
So I think, I wrote this book for women like me, which I know there's millions of me out there, of women who are, high performers and want to learn how to biohack and want to understand their bodies and want some guidance, because they're like, well, I've read all these other books and not everything works for me the same way I think it should. So where do I start? Where do I go from here? And the book was kind of like based on my course at Stanford, and also based on my practice. And really it was a way for me to try to translate mitochondrial science into something that was actually palatable for the masses and give people a sort of model of health that would help them first and foremost try to avoid the biggest killers, which is metabolic dysfunction and metabolic diseases. But it's based on this sort of structure of understanding metabolism, mitochondria, understanding mastering the stress response, understanding movement. And the key of movement is really life, because your mitochondria need the signal to create more energy, and that comes from movement. And then also maintaining connection. One of the biggest things that I didn't realize when I was teaching at Stanford was like, holy crap, I was creating a lecture on relationships. And the more I dug into relationships and human connection, I was like, oh my God, this is the biggest driver of happiness and health. And I didn't even know it. And it's like clearly the biggest lever that we are not pulling on. And as a society, I think we're not really paying attention to it like we should be. And the pandemic has really brought it to the forefront, because people have been isolated. We ran a massive human experiment. What happens when you put people in an animal study where you isolate them? Well, we have lots and lots of rat studies, but now we have a massive human study that shows that people become massively mentally dysfunctional and physiologically dysfunctional under isolation. And I think one of the big sort of initiatives I have moving forward from this book is really promoting human connection and helping people understand and demystify this facet of the biological imperative, because we think that like love is this like hand wavy Disney movie. It's not. Like, love is a battlefield, and we are like in a world where people are striving for, literally fighting over resources, and people are looking for partners, and they're looking to have children, and they're looking to reproduce and to have long-term connection and survive. And so when you start really looking at love from this angle of like, oh my God, it's so fundamental to survival that why are we not trying to understand it better? Why are we like labeling it as this thing that's always like wonderful? It's actually not. Heartbreak is terrible. Heartbreak can literally physiologically break someone's heart. If like there's this thing called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, when people lose partners, can literally cause their heart to balloon. I've seen this once in hospital. Like heartbreak, grief, divorce, like these are huge causes of disease and dysfunction. And like, obviously marriage and connection and love, when it's good, it's awesome. But when it's bad, it can be terrible. Like, people get attacked when they break up with people, when people cheat, people get murdered. Like when people like, there's all sorts of stuff, and like stalking is a form of unhealthy love. And so I'm really interested in like looking at the stuff that's like underneath the surface of what we think is health, what health is about, and going deeper and deeper into it and be like, okay, so what is human connection? Like, what does that even mean? How do you measure it? How do you amplify it? And I think we're going to enter a whole new era of health that's going to be so much more about like our interactions in society and those we surround ourselves with than just the individual ourselves. It's not like I'm saying we're going to go back to this population level health concept, because like BMI kind of is a useful tool for an individual, but I'm really looking at people's health through the lens of like, who is in their immediate environment? Where do they live? How do they interact with others? What is their relationship to their parents? What is their relationship to themselves? Have they dealt with their attachment dysfunction? And like, do they love themselves? Like all these things that were not really a big part of my practice until I started studying human health and love specifically. And then I was like, wow, I could write a whole nother book on this. And so that will probably be the next book. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm here to teach. But I would say if you're going to buy the book, it's really, I think probably the biggest value for a lot of people is going to be the metabolic work, because I didn't have a guidebook when I was using continuous glucose monitoring in 2014. I did not know what I was doing. I was sitting with these monitors and I was hacking away at them. And then I was like, wait, so my lifestyle can literally change this curve. And if I do a little bit of intermittent fasting, my fasting glucose goes down. If I stop eating late at night, my heart rate variability improves. And if I start getting more steps, my sleep improves. So it's like helping people understand these different interplays between different biomarkers, and then giving people the right tools to use, and then giving them very specific tactical recommendations to change these different areas of their health.
And I know that's where can people get access to the book? Do you have any links or anything where they can?
Yeah. I'll definitely be giving you all the links that you need to post on this, but my website at www.drmolly.co, Amazon or Barnes and Noble, the Spark Factor is the name. There's definitely definitely a lot of different like online purveyors, but those were the places that I would go. And then certainly follow me on Instagram at drmolly.co. I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn at Molly Maloof MD. So we'll give you all those links.
Super exciting to see you at the forefront of this field, and we look forward to tracking your career over the coming decades, because I think it's going to be a powerful indicator of where we go as humanity and how do we live to, as I say, 100 healthily to 100 and beyond. So
yeah,
I just want to express my appreciation for you joining us today on the Awesome Health Podcast. And if there's any final last words that you'd like to share with our listeners in regards to biohacking, health, love, whatever it is that kind of comes to mind, feel free to.
I would say that, let's see here. I would say, a lot of people, this is kind of an interesting concept, but like a lot of people post-pandemic are struggling with weight and struggling with food. And I would say that like, if you do struggle with eating issues, really looking at your relationship to yourself and any history of trauma and really healing that is actually something that a lot of people are overlooking when they're trying to change their lifestyle, but they're actually not really getting to the root of why they have eating issues. That is something that, if I had known a long time ago, it would have saved me a lot of heartbreak and issues with my own eating issues. So there's a lot of women out there that struggle with eating disorders, and we think that it's just going to be biohacking, but actually a lot of what I write about in the book is like getting under the surface of any traumas that you have, getting under the surface of any attachment issues that you have is actually an interesting way to approach food, is like understanding what is actually driving your behavior. And so that's one thing I will leave with women that I really hope that they can get out of this book as well.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to reading the book. Of course, it's available on the 1st of the year. The book is called The Spark Factor, The Secret to Supercharging Energy, Becoming Resilient, and Feeling Better Than Ever. Of course, thank you for joining us today, Dr. Molly, and we look forward to having you back again in the near future, especially after the book launch. I want to get more.
Totally. Yeah. The book launches January 31st.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today. And for all our listeners on the Awesome Health Podcast, thank you for joining us. Of course, take your health seriously. Start applying these principles, and you never know where you might end up. I can tell you one thing, it will be in a better place than if you don't. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers. Take care and have yourself a great day.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip. Turn cultured foods into superfoods. Raw fermented foods like sauerkraut and low sugar live yogurt can be good for you, but rarely have enough of the right probiotic strains for therapeutic benefit. So here's a way that you can turn them into superfoods. What I do is I get some raw sauerkraut or a healthy yogurt. Ideally, it's grass-fed or coconut-based, and you can empty 3 caps of P3OM into a container and mix it up thoroughly. Leave it at room temperature for a couple of hours before putting it back into the fridge. And what's going to happen is these probiotic levels will be multiplied. In fact, it doubles every 20 minutes. And then what you're going to get is you're going to have a food with strong proteolytic activity. To learn more about P3OM and why its patented strains make it the strongest probiotic available, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.